Hey everybody, this week we're talking about sexually transmitted infections, STIs, woo! Just some reminders before I get started. Your term papers are due this week. Make sure you get those done, make sure they're good. I can't wait to read them over break and laugh myself silly and feel, aw, because everything is usually like that. I usually have some that are like, that was hysterical, and some that are like, oh, that was so touching. So make sure you write a good paper so I have a good week. I sent a message out last week, but just another sort of reminder, student evaluations are happening right now. It's an online link. I'm not entirely sure, since I'm not a student, how it comes to you, if they're emailing them or if it just pops up in your portal, whatever it is. Please do fill those out. I do care about them and I do want to hear your feedback. So this week we're talking about sexually transmitted infections. If you haven't heard about sexually transmitted infections, you most likely have heard of sexually transmitted diseases, STDs. STIs is the newest sort of iteration of this. It's a fully inclusive term. Diseases are a very specific sort of thing, and not every infection is a disease, and so that is why we call them STIs. When it comes to STIs, one of the things that we need to understand is the difference between prevalence and incidence. There are some examples in the lecture slides that help you to figure out those sort of things. For a lot of media and other sort of things, they like to throw numbers at you, but they don't give you a lot of context and tell you what it is that they mean. And so understanding whether a number is an incidence number or a prevalence number is really, really important in thinking about these sort of things. When it comes to sort of bacterial infections versus viral infections, the most important points is that bacterial can be healed or stopped with an appropriate antibiotic. With a virus, your virus is going to take over your body, and you're going to have a virus probably forever, or until your body naturally takes care of it yourself. We don't have any way to cure viruses, although we do have ways to prevent them with vaccines and other sort of things. The other thing to know is that people often think like, well, if it's a bacteria and you can fix it, then it's no big deal. If it's a virus, then it is a big deal. And that's not necessarily true. There are some bacterial infections that can be a really big deal, and some viral infections that are not super big deal. And so each virus or bacteria is in and of its own sort of self, dependent on whether it is mild or severe, whether it's something that is going to have a huge impact on your life or not at all. The book talks a lot about the different bacterial and viral STIs. I won't go over that. I assume you can read, and you don't need to hear me droning on about things that you can read. But there are more important pieces of information in terms of testing and other sort of things. You have a lot of videos this week that talk about sort of experiences of what it's like to have an STI, what are STIs at their sort of root, what is it like to tell a partner that you have an STI, and then some more in-depth information about HIV, because HIV is sort of the big STI that a lot of people focus on and worry, and there's a lot of stigma around HIV, and so there are some videos to dispel some of those sort of ideas and notions. Most importantly, getting tested regularly is really, really important. One of the things I really like to talk about is that STIs are way more common than you realize. Getting an STI doesn't mean you're dirty or skanky or a whore or any of these sort of things. It just means you came into contact with an infection and you happen to get it. And so just as we don't feel shame when we get a cold, or we don't feel shame when we get strep throat, because those are just things that happen, we shouldn't feel shame because of STIs. A lot of that stigma is what continues to put people at risk for STIs, because we don't talk about it and we think that there's some sort of moral judgment if you get an STI. And I think it's important to destigmatize that and say, you know what, a lot of people get STIs and a lot of people will get them over their lifetime, and it's not a big deal. We just need to take appropriate care of them, and we need to be informing our partners just in case it is something that is transmittable. They have a right to know those sort of things. In terms of getting tested for STIs, there's a lot of different STI tests out there. Know what you're getting tested for. Ask for what it is that you want. If it's just a urine screening, you're probably only being tested for chlamydia and gonorrhea, nothing else. And so make sure you understand what it is that you're being tested for. And if you want more tests, then you need to ask for those sort of things. Most STI tests can be done without blood draws. There are a couple that you do need to have some blood draws. But for the most part, you can do several different screenings in a time. If you test positive, you need to let everybody that you've slept with know so that they can get tested and so that they can be treated. If not, that's how the chain of infection continues to go on. In terms of testing resources, the Chico State Health Center does STI testing. Most Planned Parenthoods throughout the state do testing. Women's health specialists up here in Butte County does STI testing. Most health departments do extensive testing. Stonewall Alliance Center of Chico does testing if you're here in Chico, and most private doctors will do STI testing, although it'll be more expensive if you go through a private doctor. Even if you have insurance, it might cost you more than if you went to a free testing sort of resource. Finally, one of the things that I am passionate about is talking about sort of body image and STIs. We know, as I have talked about, that people with poor body image have less satisfying sex. They have more risky sex because if you don't value your body and you don't see your body as inherently worthy of being protected, then you aren't going to protect it. And so for STIs, we see that people who have bad sort of body image scores are also much higher risk at getting STIs because they're not protecting themselves appropriately. And so I think it's a really important sort of thing that we love our bodies, not just because that's a good thing in and of itself, and not just because it makes us have better sex, which is also a good thing, but also it helps us to have health protective factors. So the better you feel about your body, the more likely you are to take care of it. Now, the last part I like to talk about is around STI messaging. We have a long history of STI messages being shame, death sort of inducing, blamed on women, all these sort of things. And over the years, not much has changed. We still tend to think of STIs as something that's dirty, something that is, a bad sort of thing. It happens to skanky sort of women, oftentimes blamed on women. And I think that's a really important sort of thing to dispel, that everybody can get STIs. It's not a woman's fault. And it has nothing to do with just being, a dirty, unclean sort of person. And also STIs are not the end of the world. You're not a terrible person. You're also not going to be sexless for the rest of your life. You're not going to die of all these sort of things. It's really important that we have good, positive sort of messaging. When we think about STI messaging, I think it's really important that we don't use scare tactics, because scare tactics don't actually work in the long term. We shouldn't associate cleanliness with STIs because it has nothing to do with clean. It just has, do you have an infection or not? Blaming women is not cool because everybody is having sex, both genders and all genders, and that we need to talk about this sort of stuff in terms of heteronormativity, in terms of it's only boys and girls who are having sex with each other. All of those are really important sort of STI messages that we should embrace. So this week, I want you to watch all the videos that I have, and then just reflect on what did you learn about STIs? What do you think is important? How do we get better at making sure that we have appropriate STI messaging that encourages people to test without feeling bad and shitty about themselves? All right, I will see you in 2 weeks. Bye.